Headless Horseman's helmet is one of the best looking helmets in WoW, thanks to its sinister grin and green fellfire effect, which makes a very unique look. So let's try to make this in-game helmet into reality. This helmet will be power carved from one huge block of maple wood, so for the first step my brother starts with cutting the wood planks into smaller pieces, so they can be later glued together to form one big piece. We chose maple because the helmet will be later painted with wood dye, and maple is great at absorbing color. I don't have much experience with power carving other than 2 unfinished practice sculptures, so I wanted to have as much reference material as possible, so I made a 3D model of this helmet. I was aiming for a mix of the in-game model and this concept art. I mainly used the in-game model as a reference, but it is pretty low poly, so I had to update it a little bit, while trying to stay close to the original. I have been doing 3D sculpting and modeling as a hobby for a couple of years, so making this 3D model wasn't a problem, but like I said, I have very little experience with power carving. But I think my 3D sculpting experience might give me an advantage. However, when you're sculpting in 3D program or with clay, you can of course take away material, but most importantly add material. But with power carving, you can only take away material, which in my opinion is much more difficult, because it's not easy to cover up mistakes. What is also a new feeling for me with power carving is that when you're 3D sculpting, you can have the option of mirroring the brush strokes. So I just work with one half of the model and it just mirrors that action onto the other side. But here I got to get used to carving both sides. We have a CNC machine and we used it a lot in our previous videos, so for me it is interesting to think about when the CNC is 3D carving, it just knows where to go because of the pre-planned moves. But that cannot be said here while I'm power carving, because I don't really know how to proceed in some places, so I'm just slowly chipping off the sculpture and hoping for the best. Now the very rough top of the head shape is finished, but it took a pretty long time, because I was cutting very carefully and constantly checking my reference images, so I decided to go a little more aggressive with my cuts and focused more on following the shape of my little 3D printed helmet body. Me and my brothers have been playing World of Warcraft for many years and completed the Hollow's End event multiple times, but I wasn't really familiar with the story of the Headless Horseman until a couple of years ago. The story of the Headless Horseman is a tragic one. It is about a man called Sir Thomas Thompson who was trying to save his kingdom, but ultimately that led him to his doom. In life, he was a knight of the Silver Hand, which was order of paladins whose goal was to protect the weak and innocent and vanquish the evil, but their most well-known struggle was against the undead scourge that ravaged through their lands. Apart from being a knight, he was also a pumpkin farmer. He witnessed many tragedies and betrayals inflicted by the undead scourge. As everything around him was falling apart, he ordered his family to flee to a continent of Kalimdor, while he would stay and defend their lands from the scourge. For the next 4 years, he fought against the undead with his order. He then joined the Order of the Scarlet Crusade. However, this organization was already infiltrated by the scourge, because their leader, Seidan Detrohan, was secretly slain and his body possessed by demonic dreadlord Balnazar. Sir Thomas and his fellow Scarlet Crusade members was one day led by his leader Seidan Detrohan on a routine plague check on a town full of refugees, but his now corrupted leader, twisting his mind, convinced him that things were not as they seemed, and they ultimately ended up slaying every refugee in town. However, in his blind fanatical purging, he accidentally killed his own family, which he realized after seeing the face of his daughter. He could not believe what he did, because he remembered sending them to Kalimdor, but the storm damaged the ship, and with the kingdom being in chaos, there was no way to make repairs, so the former passengers were forced to hide wherever they could. When he and his party returned to the base, he fell to madness for what he had done. Now he believed that everyone else was member of the Scourge, and he was the only one who could save the world. After killing many of his order members on Hollow's End, he was beheaded in a confrontation and finally slain. He was given an honorable burial, but once he was buried and alone, his former corrupted leader, Seidan Detrohan, now Balnazar, raised Sir Thomas from the dead and created the Headless Horseman with his own free will, and now, in his new mad form, he sees himself as being the only one living, and everyone else in his eyes being undead, and every Hollow's End, he arrives to cleanse the world and bring judgment.
You thought me killed, dead and done. Soon you shall be the fallen one.
This project was originally supposed to be on Halloween, since the Headless Horseman event is also during this time. But right as I wanted to get started with Powercarving, which was beginning of October, I got sick. Twice, so I started working on this near the end of the October, which meant it wouldn't be ready on Halloween. But looking back at it, I probably wouldn't be able to make it in time anyway, even if I wasn't sick, because I really underestimated the difficulty of this project. But at least now I was able to take my time with this. Now it's time to paint the helmet with wood dye, and this one requires only 2 colors. But looking at the model, it has hand-painted color details and shading, which I'm not even going to attempt, because it's hard enough to steadily paint in certain places, which is not that easy, because the color, if applied too much on the brush, likes to spread to places where it's not supposed to be. But since this is wood, any painting mistakes can be sanded off, to a certain degree. It's probably not visible in the video, but even after sanding the helmet, there are still so many little scratches and bumps, but eventually even I had to tell myself to stop trying to hide or fix these imperfections, which was difficult for me as a perfectionist. But a good justification for leaving these scratches on is that this is a helmet, worn in countless battles and fights, so it is only logical as a loot to be battle damaged and worn out. Although I still can't bring myself to purposefully make some big scratches or battle scars, because I don't want to damage it further and basically ruin my work. But on the other hand, these scars were added on purpose to tell a story and make that item more interesting. The oil has now dried out, so I can put this light diffusing sheet inside the mouth and eyes. And these sheets are actually taken out of an old non-functioning computer screen, and it works perfectly, almost like it was designed to work with light. To have more light inside the helmet, I'm using an aluminium foil, crumbling it and gluing it on the back and sides of the inside, so that it has more reflective surface, and it works much better than I expected. The last part of this build is the stand for the helmet that is made from the remaining piece of wood block. I'm just roughly sculpting to create uneven terrain and not really looking into carving many details, since it's just a stand. I was debating with myself whether to make the stand, let alone decorate it, but here we are. I gotta say, it is much better with the stand and its decorations, which I'll add later. And the actual inspiration for this graveyard scenery was the Scarlet Monastery graveyard, because the Headless Horseman is connected to this place, and it has the scenery I was looking for. This project is a lamp, so I have to add some lights, and for those I'm using RGB LED strips on a metal plate. Now it's finally time to assemble it all together, starting with the electronics, hidden in the carved out space underneath the stand, and then moving on to adding 3D printed gravestones and also adding stabilized moss to act as bushes. The Headless Horseman is, in my opinion, one of the coolest looking characters, with a tragic but engaging backstory, and has probably one of the best voice acting in the whole game. Because I think his voice is absolutely amazing, that just fits his character so well. And in the future there will be more projects with items connected to an iconic character. But now it is time to finally see how this project looks completed.
On your guard! The time is nigh! The Headless Horseman darkens the sky! Fire consumes! You've tried and failed! Let there be no doubt! Justice prevails! So eager you are for my blood to spill, yet to vanquish me, 'tis my head you must kill. No matter the realm, it's all the same. I will sear you all with burning flame. My flames have died, left not a spark. I shall send you myself to the lifeless dark. Prepare yourselves, or be overwhelmed. The horseman descends upon